Beneath the bustling medieval marketplace lay a secret city of trapdoors. This video uncovers 21 ingenious mechanisms that let lawless markets thrive under royal inspection. You will learn the full story of how these hidden passages worked, from pivoting counters to submerged cellar hatches. We will explore how a merchant could make his entire stall vanish in an instant, and what cunning secret was hidden within a church pew. These were not just simple holes but masterpieces of deception, blending carpentry, basic physics, and pure nerve. Their legacy challenges our view of history, revealing a world of thrilling subterfuge operating just below the surface of daily life. What do you think is the most clever way to hide something in plain sight? Royal authority often felt distant in these bustling town squares, a mere whisper against the roar of daily commerce. But that whisper could become a shout at any moment with the arrival of the king's inspectors. These officials wielded the power to confiscate goods, levy heavy fines, or even shutter a business entirely. For a merchant selling goods without the crown's seal of approval, or perhaps offering items banned by powerful guilds, every shadow could hide a threat. This constant pressure did not just create fear, it sparked a remarkable wave of innovation. The need to hide one's livelihood became as fundamental as the trade itself. Yet to label these hidden markets as purely criminal would be a mistake. They were, for many common folk, an essential economy. They provided access to affordable goods, bypassed unfair guild monopolies, and offered a measure of independence from a rigid social order. So when a merchant slid a countertop aside to reveal a hidden compartment, he was not merely hiding contraband, he was protecting a fragile ecosystem of survival. This high-stakes game of cat and mouse between the enforcers of royal will and the defenders of local commerce pushed medieval carpentry and simple mechanics to their absolute limits. The very architecture of the marketplace began to tell a secret story, one written in hidden hinges and counterbalanced floors. The sheer genius of these devices lay not in their complexity, but in their perfect deception. They were masterpieces of misdirection, built to be utterly invisible until the very moment they were needed. A merchant's entire survival depended on a piece of the floor that was not really a floor, or a barrel bottom that was not really a bottom. These were not crude holes covered by a rug, but sophisticated illusions crafted by skilled artisans who understood both wood and human nature. The primary goal was always seamless integration. A trapdoor built into a stone floor would use actual stone slabs carefully balanced. One hidden in a wooden countertop would be made from the exact same planks, its seams lost in the natural grain and grooves of the wood. Even the hardware was part of the disguise. Iron hinges were a dead giveaway, so craftsmen used straps of tough, flexible leather to act as silent, invisible pivots. The mechanisms for opening these hidden portals were as varied as the doors themselves. Some relied on a simple counterweight, a heavy stone hidden within a wall that would allow a heavy section of flooring to swing upward with a gentle push. Others used pivots and latches, where a specific stone in a wall or a seemingly loose floorboard acted as a secret lever. More advanced systems involved clever magnetic locks, where a merchant could use a lodestone hidden in his pocket to release a catch, or even water-powered releases connected to a cistern, ensuring a stall could be cleared if a hidden lever near the door was tripped. This dual requirement was their defining challenge. For the merchant, it had to be instant, a single, practiced motion to make evidence disappear. For the inspector, it had to offer no hint of a seam, no hollow sound, no visual disruption. A common and brilliantly simple solution was the false bottom. A chest or barrel would appear perfectly normal, perhaps even containing a legitimate layer of goods. But beneath that layer was a second, hidden compartment, accessible only by a discreet catch or by removing the entire first layer. This principle of hiding a space within a space is one we still see in certain types of furniture today, a direct echo of medieval ingenuity. The true art was in the complete package, the way materials, mechanism, and placement combined to create a perfect picture of everyday normalcy, all while guarding a world of secrets just out of sight. That central hearthstone, warm from the fire, was far more than a slab of rock. It was a perfect example of how medieval builders turned the most ordinary object into a sophisticated secret. Picture the scene. A tavern is bustling with life, patrons laughing and sharing stories, all gathered around the comforting heat of the fireplace. Right under their feet and beneath the soot and ash lay a hidden entrance. The stone itself was massive, far too heavy for one person to lift under normal circumstances, but with a counterweight system cleverly concealed within the chimney's brickwork, the entire slab could pivot smoothly and almost silently. A simple hook, perhaps shaped to look like a simple poker or a loose brick, would release a hidden latch. With a gentle push, the stone would swing upward, revealing a dark cavity below. The space itself was ideal for hiding small, valuable items that needed to stay out of royal hands. Unminted silver, rare spices, or sealed documents could be tucked away safely. The constant heat from the fire served a dual purpose. It kept the hidden goods dry, and just as importantly, the strong scent of wood smoke and ash completely masked any lingering aroma from the contraband, throwing off the sensitive noses of inspection hounds. This placement was a stroke of psychological genius. An inspector might meticulously search a quiet storeroom, but they were far less inclined to get on their hands and knees and poke around a hot, dirty, active fireplace. It was a public secret hiding in the most public place imaginable, proving that sometimes the best way to conceal something is to put it right in the center of the room. Out in the open air of the market, a merchant's greatest fear was the watchful eye of authority. With nowhere to run and no walls to hide behind, his only defense was a breathtaking act of deception built into the very heart of his stall. The main counter, that sturdy platform of commerce where coins were counted and goods were handed over, was a complete illusion. Crafted around a central pivot, the entire structure was a giant trapdoor in disguise. For the merchant, a single, practiced motion was all it took. He might lean heavily on a specific corner, or his foot would find a hidden pedal beneath the straw-covered ground. In an instant, the counter would swing upward or sideways, its movement smooth and silent thanks to perfectly balanced weights. The goods on display, often small sacks of grain or clay pots, were subtly secured to the surface to prevent a noisy, tell-tale crash during the swift maneuver. Imagine the scene. A lookout gives a quiet signal. The king's men are at the far end of the square. Without a moment of hesitation, the merchant makes his public workspace vanish, sweeping everything illicit into a shallow, hidden compartment below. By the time the guards arrive, he is just a man standing by an empty stall frame, perhaps feigning a repair. This method was effective precisely because of its sheer audacity. It relied on the fact that no one would ever suspect the very platform of public transaction to be the gateway to its own secret world. The pivoting counter was not just a hiding place, it was a performance of normalcy played out in the blink of an eye. While the pivoting counter was a masterpiece of instant deception, other merchants played a longer game, using the very environment itself as a permanent shield. Water, the lifeblood of any medieval settlement, could be channeled into a brilliant defensive system. In cellars located near a river or a spring, you would often find a shallow drainage channel carved into the stone floor, a common feature for dealing with inevitable dampness. But this was no simple gutter. Hidden just below its waterline was a flat, sealed trapdoor, invisible to any casual glance. To access the secret sub-cellar it protected, a merchant needed a specific tool and a specific sequence of actions. He would take a long pole, and at a precise spot in the channel, he would use it to unseal a hidden water gate. This was a simple wooden or stone sluice that, when opened, allowed the channel to drain into a lower underground stream or a seepage pit. As the water level dropped, the submerged hatch would be revealed, its edges now clear of the murky water. This hidden chamber was perfect for items that were too bulky for a simple hearthstone cavity, or that actually benefited from the cool, damp conditions. Illicit barrels of ale or wine, certain perishable foodstuffs, or even raw materials like wool could be stored here, preserved by the very environment that concealed them. The system provided a powerful psychological barrier as well. Royal inspectors, often dressed in fine clothes or armor, were notoriously unwilling to wade into dark, cold, chest-deep water on the mere chance of finding a hidden latch. Why would they? It looked and functioned exactly like a common drain. This mechanism demonstrates a higher level of planning, where the natural challenges of a location were not just overcome, but were woven directly into the fabric of the secret. The water was not a problem to be solved, it was the perfect partner in crime. In the smoky chaos of a blacksmith's forge, the giant bellows were more than just a tool for fire. They were the hidden key to a secret below the floor. This mechanism was a masterpiece of coordinated action, turning a routine chore into a secure command. A typical bellows required a steady rhythm to feed a fire, but this one was modified with a hidden internal latch. To open the hidden panel, the smith had to perform a specific, unusual sequence. 3 short, sharp pumps followed by 1 long, sustained push would trip the release. The final, long press would engage a lever connected by a thin, almost invisible iron rod to a floor panel a few feet away. That panel, often strategically buried under a pile of scrap iron or old straw, would then swing downward on silent leather hinges. The entire process was masked by the very nature of the work. The constant whoosh of air, the roar of the flames, and the clatter of tools provided the perfect acoustic cover for the soft thud of the trapdoor. An inspector could stand right there, watching the smith sweat and toil, and see nothing more than a man hard at work. The trigger was not a lever to be found or a stone to be pressed. It was a sequence of actions burned into the smith's muscle memory. This made it virtually immune to accidental discovery. Even if a guard grew suspicious and decided to operate the bellows himself, he would never stumble upon the precise, unnatural rhythm needed to trigger the lock. It was security through learned behavior, a secret code written not on paper, but in the motion of the arms and the timing of the breath. A barrel of salted fish or common nails was the last thing to draw a royal inspector's eye, and that was the entire point of its secret. The recessed barrel bottom was a masterpiece of minimalist concealment. A cooper, perhaps paid a little extra for his discretion, would build a second, inner bottom several inches above the true base of the barrel. This created a shallow, hidden compartment perfectly sized for items that were flat, valuable, and needed to stay utterly dry. Forged land deeds, pamphlets challenging royal authority, or even thin, hammered sheets of silver could be slipped into this narrow space. The trigger to release the inner panel was a work of art in itself. It might be a specific sequence of taps on the iron hoops, a pattern that sounded like an idle rhythm, but actually tripped a delicate wooden latch inside. Or a particular wood knot on the stave could be pressed, its surface indistinguishable from any other to the untrained eye. An inspector would see a completely normal barrel, perhaps even heft it, and hear the legitimate contents slosh or shift inside. The weight felt correct, the sound was convincing. He could look right over the rim and see the layer of goods, never suspecting a hollow space lay just beneath them. This mechanism exploited the profound trust people place in everyday objects. It proved that the most perfect hiding spot is not a dark corner, but the very center of the room, disguised as something too ordinary to even merit a second glance. Stone and brick walls held secrets as solid as the materials themselves. A particular brick in a foundation, looking no different from any other, might be the hidden heart of an entire security system. It was not loose in the way you might think, but meticulously engineered. This brick was mounted on a near-invisible internal pivot, a tiny axis of stone or hardened wood that allowed it to tilt or slide with precise, minimal pressure. Pressing its top edge inward, or perhaps sliding it sideways in a specific sequence, would engage a simple but robust internal lever. That lever, in turn, would withdraw a heavy wooden or iron bar, bolting shut a much larger trapdoor concealed under a heavy rug or a stack of grain sacks in the corner of the room. The entire assembly was kept in perfect working order for decades, often lubricated with rendered animal fat or beeswax to guarantee its operation was utterly silent. This was a mechanism built for the long term, integrated into the very bones of a building during its construction. Its greatest strength was its total lack of suspicious, movable parts. A royal inspector could empty the room of all furniture, tap on every wall, and still find nothing out of the ordinary. The trigger was not an object to be found, but a piece of the wall itself, a permanent sentinel waiting for the one person who knew its secret. How many people, do you suppose, leaned against that very wall over the years, completely unaware they were resting on the hidden lock to another world? That freestanding bookcase in a merchant's private study was far more than a piece of furniture. Inspired by the legendary secret chambers of the Knights Templar, this rotary bookcase was the pinnacle of hidden space technology, reserved for merchants of significant wealth or those trading in forbidden knowledge. It was the difference between hiding a single item and concealing an entire operation. The unit itself was a masterpiece of balance, mounted on a central pivot that ran from floor to ceiling. It looked completely normal, laden with heavy leather-bound account books, legal scrolls, and perhaps some decorative pottery. This weight was crucial, providing the stability that kept the massive structure from wobbling and masking any faint sound from the pivot mechanism with the sheer solidity of its contents. Accessing the secret was a deliberate act. A merchant wouldn't simply push the case aside. Instead, he would reach for a specific, dummy book that was actually a cleverly disguised handle, or he would gently turn a decorative finial on top of the case that served as a lock release. With a smooth, quiet motion, the entire bookcase would swing open like a door, revealing a narrow entrance to a hidden room or a deep storage compartment built directly into the wall behind it. This was not a mechanism for a panicked scramble. It was for securing a larger, more permanent illicit enterprise. Behind that rotating facade, a merchant might store entire bolts of uncertified silk, chests of untaxed silver, or even a small printing press for producing pamphlets that challenged the Crown's authority. This device represented a significant evolution in the cat and mouse game, proving that as the stakes grew higher, the hidden architecture of the Lawless markets grew bolder and more ambitious, scaling up from simple hidey holes to entire concealed spaces operating in plain sight. Even the simple act of drawing water could hide a secret exchange. At the village well, a place of daily gossip and communal routine, a modified bucket served as a perfect courier. This was no ordinary pail. A skilled craftsman would have fitted it with a second, concealed bottom, creating a shallow compartment just deep enough to hold a small, oilskin-wrapped package. The release mechanism was a work of subtle genius. Some relied on a magnetic latch, where a specific lodestone set into the well's stone lining at a precise depth would draw back a tiny iron bolt, freeing the false bottom. Others used a plug made of salt or hardened beeswax, a water-soluble seal that would dissolve after the bucket was submerged for a specific count, allowing the hidden contents to drop silently into the darkness below. The well shaft itself was the true hiding place. A narrow ledge carved into the stone or a small net suspended from an iron ring driven into the wall would catch the falling package. Retrieval was just as discreet, requiring another specially prepared bucket or a hook on the end of the rope to gather the goods on a later visit. This system turned essential public infrastructure into a private, secure drop box. Royal inspectors might question a merchant in his shop or search his home, but the idea of meticulously examining the interior of a common well, a resource used by everyone from the mayor to the poorest farmer, would have seemed absurd. The security of the well bucket drop did not come from complex engineering, but from its flawless integration into the unremarkable rhythm of daily life. The heat of the bakery oven was a shield in itself. While the hearthstone in a tavern relied on public activity for cover, the baker's slab leaned into pure, uncomfortable intensity. This large, flat stone that formed the oven floor was not a single piece. One specific slab was meticulously engineered, hinged along one edge and balanced by a counterweight hidden within the oven's brick structure. When cool, a baker could lift this heavy stone with surprising ease, revealing a shallow cavity carved into the earth or masonry beneath. The environment provided perfect natural camouflage. A fine layer of flour dust and accumulated soot settled into every tiny seam, rendering the outline of the trapdoor invisible against the surrounding stone. More importantly, the blistering heat radiating from the oven made any close inspection a torturous prospect. A royal official, dressed in layers of formal clothing, would never kneel for a prolonged period to scrutinize the floor of a 500-degree oven. This space was reserved for small, valuable items that could withstand the dry heat. Untaxed coinage, small wax-sealed documents, or even certain rare spices were kept safe here, sterilized and dried by the ambient temperature. This mechanism transformed the very heart of a bakery, a place synonymous with community and daily bread, into a secure vault. It was a profound deception, hiding the secrets of an illicit trade within the most essential and trusted of household spaces. High above the stable, the hayloft was a world of its own, a dry and shadowy space filled with the sweet scent of straw. But one section of that loft floor was an illusion. A merchant could shift a specific, unremarkable hay bale, and a panel would swing open, creating a steep chute. Sacks of grain, small casks, or bundles of cloth would slide down this hidden passage, their descent muffled by the constant rustle of livestock and straw below. In the stable, a wide, sturdy net was suspended in the darkness of the rafters, catching the falling goods silently and safely. This was more than a hiding spot, it was a rapid distribution system. The entire process from trigger to capture took only moments. A cart could be positioned directly beneath the net, its load covered by a blanket, ready to roll out the main doors before any official even reached the property. This mechanism highlights a crucial evolution in these secret networks. The goal was no longer just to hide contraband from a search, but to keep it moving, to ensure that the flow of goods through the covert market never stopped. It was logistics perfected for an invisible economy where speed and silence were the ultimate currencies. The rhythmic clatter of a loom provided its own kind of secrecy. In the weaver's crowded workshop, the massive horizontal warp beam was the heart of the operation, a solid cylinder wrapped tightly in hundreds of threads. Yet this essential component held a hollow core. A carefully crafted section of the beam could be unlocked and swung aside, creating a long, tubular cavity invisible beneath the dense layers of yarn. The trigger to access this space was a sequence of deliberate errors. A weaver would press a combination of treadles in an order that made no sense for actual weaving, or perhaps slide the shuttle along a specific groove with an unusual amount of force. These actions would trip a delicate internal latch, allowing a segment of the beam to pivot open. The hiding spot was perfectly shaped for long, narrow items. Banned religious scrolls, specialized tools for other illicit crafts, or even disassembled sections of hunting weapons could be stored within the very machine that was the public face of the weaver's trade. This mechanism represents a pinnacle of specialized deception. It was not a generic hiding place added to a room, but one born from the tool itself. An inspector, even a knowledgeable one, would see only a working loom. The secret was safe because it required the intimate, practiced knowledge of the craft to even perceive its existence, let alone to command it to open. The communal outhouse turned human aversion into a perfect security system. This was a hiding place that relied not on clever mechanics, but on a powerful and universal social taboo. The structure itself, a place of necessary but unpleasant function, was the last location any royal inspector would ever choose for a meticulous search. A trapdoor might be concealed under a removable section of the wooden seat, or built into a stone wall behind a loose brick that smelled of damp earth and lime. Its trigger was often something no one would willingly touch, like a specific timber support that felt greasy or a brick that seemed permanently slick. The foul odors that permeated the small building were a potent natural deterrent, discouraging anyone from lingering long enough to notice a faint seam in the wood or a hollow sound from a wall. This method was a stark admission that sometimes the most effective shield is not strength but revulsion. It protected items that were ironically pristine, kept safe in wax-sealed containers or oilcloth wrappings. Small sacks of rare spices, bundles of untaxed legal documents, or pouches of silver coins could be hidden here, completely isolated from the world above by a psychological barrier far stronger than any iron lock. Who would ever think to look for treasure in a place so universally shunned? Even the house of God was not beyond the reach of this secret trade. Within the hallowed silence of the church, a different kind of faith was at work, one that placed its trust in hidden compartments over divine intervention. The very pews where the congregation knelt to pray held a secret. The humble kneeler, that simple wooden bar polished smooth by generations of devout parishioners, was often a cleverly disguised box. A specific, ornate carving on the pew itself, perhaps a certain rosette or a saint's face, could be pressed inward. With a soft, almost inaudible click, a section of the kneeler would unlatch, swinging downward on discreet leather hinges to reveal a shallow, long compartment. This space was perfect for items that needed to be passed from one person to another without ever being seen in the open. A sealed letter, a small pouch of coins for a forbidden transaction, or a single, precious band book could be left inside. The system relied on the profound sanctity of the location. A royal inspector, no matter how determined, would think twice before desecrating a place of worship with a thorough, invasive search. To publicly rifle through the pews would be to risk the wrath of the entire community and the local clergy, who are often willing to turn a blind eye in exchange for a share of the hidden market's profits or simply out of sympathy for their flock. This mechanism did not hide its secrets in shadow or filth, but in plain sight, shielded by the unassailable armor of public reverence. It was a stark reminder that in this clandestine war, no institution, no matter how sacred, was entirely neutral ground. High above the cobbled streets, the creaking shop sign was more than an advertisement. It was a silent sentinel. An elaborately painted carving of a loaf of bread or a sturdy boot swung gently in the breeze, but its true purpose was far more cunning. Inside the shop, a merchant could pull on a specific rope, one that looked identical to the others, controlling interior shutters or a hanging lamp. This action would trigger a complex but silent mechanism within the sign's heavy wooden bracket. Through a hidden series of pulleys and levers, the entire sign would pivot a quarter turn on its iron support, a motion subtle enough to be mistaken for a strong gust of wind. This theatrical movement was the final step in a security sequence. The pivot, in turn, would withdraw a heavy wooden bar, bolting a cleverly concealed trapdoor in the shop's ceiling or an upper floor. The true brilliance of this system was its dual nature. The trigger was pulled in the privacy of the shop, but the confirming action happened in the public view of the street. An accomplice lounging near the town well or a lookout stationed in a window across the square needed only to glance up. If the sign had pivoted, it signaled that the merchant had successfully hidden his illicit goods and that the coast was clear. If the sign remained in its normal position, it was a silent alarm, a warning to stay away. This transformed a simple piece of street furniture into a sophisticated communication network, allowing an entire covert operation to coordinate its movements under the very noses of the authorities. It was security theater performed for an audience of one, where the most public display became the most private of signals. How many people walked beneath that pivoting sign, completely unaware they were witnessing the climax of a hidden drama? A horse's simple wooden manger was the perfect stage for a hidden performance. While the animal focused on its meal, its owner could discreetly press a latch hidden beneath the layer of oats or straw. With a soft, almost imperceptible click, a section of the solid-looking front would swing downward, revealing a small storage cavity built into the wall behind the trough. The true genius of this mechanism was its reliance on the horse's own instincts. As the merchant reached into the hidden space, the animal would naturally nuzzle and shift in its stall, its movements and munching sounds providing perfect acoustic cover for any faint noise from the swinging panel. This design did not just hide a compartment, it integrated the entire process of accessing it into the normal, chaotic symphony of stable life. An inspector could stand in the very stall and see nothing more than a man tending to his livestock, the most innocent of scenes. The horse, entirely unaware, became the most reliable partner in the deception, its predictable behaviors guaranteeing that the secret remained safe. This mechanism demonstrates a profound understanding of environment, where every element, even the living ones, could be orchestrated into a seamless veil of normalcy. The steady, resonant ticking of the town clock tower was the heartbeat of civic life, but within that chamber of whirring gears and massive pendulums, a different kind of time was being kept. The floorboards beneath the colossal clockwork machinery concealed a hidden panel, and its lock was the mechanism itself. To open it, the clockkeeper had to perform a deliberate act of sabotage against the flow of time. He would use a heavy iron lever to disengage the main drive, then manually crank several of the largest gears into a specific, nonsensical alignment, a configuration that would never occur during normal operation. Only when the teeth of a particular gear meshed perfectly with a hidden latch would the floor panel release, swinging open on a counterweight to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The sheer noise of the process was its greatest asset. The deafening grind of protesting metal and the thunderous ticking masked every sound, making private conversation possible even as the trapdoor was accessed. This was the ultimate infiltration of public trust. The clockkeeper, a respected figure tasked with maintaining order, became the guardian of chaos, using the town's most visible symbol of control to protect the very market that operated outside of it. His payment was not just in coin but in power, holding a secret that could unravel the entire facade of royal authority in the town. How many townsfolk, glancing up at the clock to check the hour, ever suspected that its hands were sometimes moved not by the laws of mechanics, but by the hidden demands of the market below? A town bridge was more than a crossing. It was a checkpoint where commerce could be inspected and controlled. The stone parapet lining its edge, worn smooth by generations of hands, became the perfect blind spot. One particular stone, indistinguishable from its neighbors, was a masterfully crafted plug. It was not mortared into place like the others, but held fast by a single, slender iron pin driven deep into the adjacent masonry. To the casual observer, it was just another piece of the bridge, but for a merchant in the know, a simple twist of a metal hook, perhaps disguised as a walking stick's ferrule, could catch that hidden pin and draw it out. The stone would then lift free, revealing a deep, dry cavity carved into the heart of the bridge wall itself. This hollow space transformed the entire structure into a passive agent of the secret market. A merchant could cross the bridge at dawn, casually leaning on the parapet as he slipped a small oilskin packet into the darkness. Hours later, a different person from his network could cross from the opposite direction and retrieve it, all without a single word or glance being exchanged. This was the ultimate dead drop, a system that completely severed the link between the person leaving the item and the person collecting it. If a royal inspector grew suspicious of one merchant, following him and searching his stall would yield nothing, for the evidence was already resting safely inside the public bridge, waiting for a partner he might never even meet in person. It turned the Crown's own infrastructure against it, creating an anonymous, resilient communication network that operated in plain sight, a medieval precursor to the most secure digital dead drops used today. Even the most chaotic tavern brawl could be a meticulously staged performance. Certain heavy oak tables, the kind bolted firmly to the floor for stability, held a secret in one of their stout legs. This was no ordinary piece of furniture. A specific spot on the leg, often a worn-looking knot in the wood, concealed a sensitive internal latch. A sharp, deliberate kick to that exact point, delivered with just the right amount of force, was the key. The resulting thud and the slight shudder of the table were not signs of damage, but of success. The kick would trip the latch, unlocking a small, perfectly fitted trapdoor in the floorboards directly beneath the table. The entire action was choreographed to look like the clumsy stumble of a drunkard, a common and completely unremarkable occurrence in any lively inn. No one would bat an eye at a patron lurching against the furniture. The sound of the trapdoor releasing was masked by the general din of laughter, shouting, and clattering tankards. Accessing the hidden compartment, however, required a second, more subtle step. One of the long, fixed benches attached to the table was not entirely immovable. A specific end could be lifted upward on a silent pivot, revealing the open trapdoor below. This two-step process ensured that even if someone accidentally triggered the lock with a stray kick, they would never stumble upon the open compartment itself. The space was ideal for passing small, high-value items like unminted coins or sealed letters from one person to another without any visible contact. A merchant could enter the tavern, order a drink, and during a feigned moment of inebriation, activate the trap. Later, his contact could arrive, take the same seat, and retrieve the goods, all under the perfect cover of tolerated social disorder. It was a mechanism that weaponized expectation, proving that the best way to hide a secret action is to make it look like a public nuisance. High atop the stone tower, the windmill sails turned with a purpose known only to the miller himself. Their great wooden frames, constantly shifting to capture the capricious wind, were the public face of an intricate secret. Deep within the mill's foundation, a heavy trapdoor lay bolted shut, its iron bar connected by a hidden series of levers and pulleys to the very mechanism that controlled the sail angles. To open this vault, the miller had to perform a deliberate act of sabotage against his own productivity. He would release the brake and manually crank the gears, not to an optimal position for grinding grain, but to a specific, awkward angle that made the sails shudder and strain against the breeze. Anyone watching from the town below would see only a diligent craftsman fine-tuning his equipment, a common and unremarkable sight. They could not see the soft click from below as the misaligned gears finally tripped the hidden latch, withdrawing the iron bar and freeing the trapdoor. This system was brilliantly secure because the trigger was a public performance of normalcy. A royal inspector standing right beside the miller would observe nothing more than a man attending to his trade. The miller's specialized knowledge provided the perfect cover, allowing him to hide an entire sub-cellar filled with untaxed flour or even larger contraband in plain sight, using the mill's own mighty heartbeat as the key. A cobbler's last, that humble wooden form shaped like a foot, was a constant presence on the workbench, a symbol of honest, skilled labor. Yet even this fundamental tool could be turned into a perfect vessel for secrecy. A craftsman could commission a last with a heel that unscrewed, its threads carved with such precision that the seam was invisible against the wood's natural grain. A simple, practiced twist was all it took to separate the heel, revealing a small, cylindrical cavity drilled deep into the body of the form. This space was reserved for the most concentrated forms of wealth or information. A few unminted gold coins, a handful of uncut gemstones, or a tightly rolled, wax-sealed message could be tucked away inside. The brilliance of this method lay in its performance. A cobbler, sensing the approach of authority, could simply pick up the last and begin inspecting it, turning it over in his hands as any artisan might. In that casual motion, he could twist the heel free, empty or fill the cavity, and screw it back into place, all under the guise of examining his own workmanship. The entire action was a masterpiece of micro-concealment, hiding items of immense value within the very object that defined his public trade. It proved that sometimes the greatest security lies not in a massive hidden vault, but in the absolute trust we place in the ordinary tools of daily life. Who would ever think to confiscate and dismantle a shoemaker's last? The communal bread oven stood as the warm, beating heart of the village, a place where the line between public necessity and private secret blurred completely. Its ash pit was a seemingly straightforward feature, a simple cavity where the gritty remains of yesterday's fire were swept for disposal. But that grate at the bottom was no ordinary piece of ironwork. With a practiced motion during the routine cleaning, a baker could slide the entire grate sideways along a hidden track. Instead of falling into the main pit, the warm ashes would tumble into a secondary, concealed chamber built right beside it. This hidden space was then accessible through a discreet panel in the wall of an adjacent cellar or storeroom, a space that appeared to have no connection to the oven at all. The system's security was woven from the fabric of everyday life. Royal inspectors saw only a baker performing a dirty, mundane chore, a man up to his elbows in soot. They had no reason to suspect that the pile of harmless ash was a deliberate curtain, a natural barrier that protected whatever lay in the secret compartment. The trigger was not a hidden lever or a secret code, but a task so ordinary it was invisible. This final mechanism perfectly encapsulates the philosophy behind all 21 of these devices. It was not about complex machinery or magical concealment, but about a profound understanding of human nature. It exploited the universal tendency to overlook the boring, the dirty, and the routine. In the end, the greatest trick these medieval minds ever pulled was not building a hidden door, but convincing everyone that there was nothing worth looking at in the first place. Royal inspectors were far from the bumbling officials you might imagine. For every trapdoor crafted in shadow, a countermeasure was perfected in the light of royal authority. These men developed a keen eye for the unnatural rhythm of a marketplace. They carried long, thin iron probes not as weapons but as listening devices. Tapping systematically on floors and walls, they learned to distinguish the solid thud of packed earth from the telltale hollow echo of a concealed void. Their ears became as important as their eyes, trained to pick up the subtle acoustics of deception. They also brought specialized hounds, animals trained not for hunting but for scent. A dog could be taught to sit silently before a wall that smelled of rare pepper or indigo dye, its stillness a damning indictment of the space behind the stones. The inspector's greatest tool, however, was observation. They watched for the merchant who could not help but glance at a particular floorboard, or the shopkeeper who became unusually agitated when asked to move a seemingly empty barrel. They understood that human nerves were often the weakest link in any mechanical secret. Some inspectors took this further, going completely undercover. They would pose as new merchants looking for suppliers, or as wealthy travelers seeking rare goods, spending weeks to earn the trust of a network only to dismantle it from the inside. This relentless pressure forced the trapdoor builders to innovate endlessly. A hollow sound was a death sentence, so compartments were packed with sand or wool to muffle the probe's echo. Strong scents were a liability, so spices were wrapped in waxed cloth and hidden near pungent herbs or smoky fires. This was not a static battle but a dynamic arms race, a high-stakes game of psychological warfare where a single flinch could mean financial ruin for a merchant or permanent disgrace for an inspector who failed his king. The very ingenuity of the hidden mechanisms was, in fact, a direct response to the growing cunning of the men tasked to find them. From pivoting counters to hollow well shafts, these 21 trapdoor mechanisms reveal a hidden layer of ingenuity and rebellion woven into the fabric of medieval life. They were not just simple holes in the ground, but sophisticated responses to intense economic pressure, rigid social hierarchy, and a profound human desire for autonomy. Each hidden latch and counterbalanced stone was a quiet argument against a system that sought to control every aspect of commerce. This was not mere law-breaking, it was a form of grassroots economic policy, enacted one secret compartment at a time. These clever secrets force us to remember that history is not solely a record of kings and epic battles, but also of the quiet, clever defiance of everyday people striving to carve out their own small piece of freedom. The legacy of these hidden passages lives on, far beyond tales of romanticized smugglers. We see its principles in the secure dead drops of modern espionage, in the digital encryption that protects our private communications, and in the endless, evolving dance between regulation and evasion that defines so much of our world. It is the same fundamental contest played out with different tools. The next time you walk through an old town square with its worn cobblestones and ancient timbered buildings, pause for a moment. Remember that beneath your feet may lie the silent echoes of a secret world, a testament to the timeless and universal art of hiding in plain sight. If these stories of clandestine innovation captivated you, we would love to hear your own thoughts. Which of these 21 mechanisms did you find the most clever? Share your favorite in the comments below and subscribe to unearth more hidden histories waiting to be told. The cleverness of a hollowed-out cobbler's last or a pivoting windmill sail speaks to a universal human impulse that transcends the Middle Ages. That same spirit of creative circumvention is alive and well today, simply operating with new tools. The digital world is its new frontier. The complex algorithms of modern encryption are the direct descendants of those hidden levers and magnetic locks, both designed to shield private information from prying eyes. Where a merchant once slid a false bottom into a barrel, a smuggler today might install a hidden compartment within the frame of a car, using the same principles of misdirection and seamless integration. Even the sprawling, informal economies that operate outside of official channels mirror the covert logistics of the medieval market, moving goods and information through networks built on trust and anonymity. The core driver remains unchanged, a deeply ingrained desire to protect one's livelihood, privacy, or beliefs from an authority perceived as overreaching or unjust. This historical through line is so compelling that modern security consultants and forensic specialists sometimes study these ancient trapdoors. They are not looking for blueprints, but for insights into the psychology of concealment, to better understand how people think when they need to hide something. Meanwhile, urban explorers in forgotten cellars and attics still seek out the physical remnants of these spaces, running their hands over stones, hoping to feel the faint seam of a pivot that hasn't moved in centuries. This enduring legacy reveals a fundamental truth. The tension between innovative evasion and institutional control is not a historical anomaly, but a perpetual cycle. Reflecting on these clever medieval mechanisms gives us a new lens for our own world. It encourages us to look past the obvious function of the systems that surround us, to consider the hidden layers they might contain and the unintended uses they might inspire. The final, lasting lesson from those lawless markets is to always look for the trapdoor, because there is almost always another layer to the story.